All right. Good morning. It's good to see all of you this morning. I appreciate you coming out on such a cold, windy morning. The wind woke us up about 3 o'clock this morning, so I didn't know what it was going to be like, but I appreciate you coming out for the meet and greet this morning. I'm Derick Hinson. Just a little bit about myself, and then a basic platform statement, and then I'll try to take questions as much as we can. I was born in Fayetteville. My father was in the Air Force, but we moved to Winston in 1966. My brother was born in 66. We moved to Winston. I was 2 years old, lived in Winston my entire life, and my parents were from Elkin, Surry County, but we already had a uncle and aunt. My father's brother was living in Winston, so we moved to Winston. I attended schools in Winston. I went to Mineral Springs Junior High, went to Carver High. Enjoyed my years at Carver. I was there from 9th and 10th grade. Everything was 2-2-2-2 back then. And so I come through Carver in 9th and 10th and graduated from North Forsyth. Once a Viking, always a Viking. And so my father died in my senior year in high school in a car accident. And so I went to work. Didn't go to college and went to work. And ended up in a mill and worked in a mill, supported my family for 9 years. But after 7 years, I went to High Point College at the time for 2 years at night and took everything I could take at night and then finished up in the daytime, left the mill and went to Belk over at Haynes Mall, worked part-time over there to finish up 2 years of college. I graduated with honors from High Point University. By then it had become High Point University. And graduated with honors on time in 4 years with a wife and 2 kids. And went to school full-time during the day for 2 years and walked across that stage at High Point. Had great professors over there and speak highly about High Point University. Eventually, I had a teaching degree by then, and Brother Mike's with us this morning, but I had friends that were working for Farm Bureau Insurance. And so instead of going into teaching at that point in time, I went to work in the insurance business and worked for Mike as my manager for almost 7 years and enjoyed those years. And then a man that I was working with, his wife was a world history teacher over in Davison County, and she had a sister that was a guidance counselor in High Point. And so I went to High Point, Southwest Guilford High, and got on over there. Taught EC social studies for a year and then moved into a regular education classroom and taught world history, AP Euro, US history, and AP comparative government for the next 23 years. And so I retired a year ago, June, from Southwest Guilford High School and with 25 years of service, including sick days. And I talked to someone recently, sick days. That's a generational thing. The sick day, the benefits for teaching. You don't go into teaching for the money. You probably don't even go into it just for all the benefits. But there are benefits. It's a job that still has a pension. I retired with 25 years of service at 61 years old and had a pension. And the sick days. And the sick days and the personal days are very liberal. But what I was able to do in 24 years is to build up 1.3 years of sick days. You have to have 25 years of service. Everybody says, well, it's 30. Well, it's 30 if you're less than 60. But if you're 60, it's 25. And so I was 61 and retired with 24 years of service and 1.3 years of sick days. But what you see out there today is you see a generation of younger teachers, and they take mental health days, and I'm not knocking them. It's a different world. It's a different world today to teach in the classroom and to deal with some of the things on the front lines that teachers and TAs deal with in the classroom, in that environment, and what's allowed in that environment. And so I predict in 4 or 5 years you won't see teachers retire with a year's worth of sick days anymore because they burn them up as fast as they get them. So I spent 24 years in education, public education. I retired last year. My wife is a financial secretary at an elementary school. And so we saw, like all taxpayers across this city and this county saw, we saw the terrible debt crisis that has come to Winston Forsyth County schools, and the whole dilemma, and the fact that I had spent 24 years in public schools, the financial part of it, and the frontline classroom part of it, it led me to want to become a member of the school board in Winston Forsyth County. And so I made the decision with my family, with my friends, to enter this race and to become part of this campaign this year to run for the Winston Forsyth County School Board. The acronym that I have attempted to put together this year for my campaign is the word trust, to rebuild a sense of trust between the school board itself and the permanent superintendent, when one is chosen, and the CFO that works for the superintendent, and then the central office itself. To rebuild that trust between the school board and the administration, between the school board and taxpayers in this city and this county. Now, the acronym TRUST, the T, stands for Teaching Basics. And several people this morning, before we sat in here and came together, I've tried to talk to individuals and answer questions. And when we talk about teaching basics, it means to go back to fundamentals of reading comprehension. Reading comprehension is probably what changed my life. What I liked in school, and I know there's a lot of people like this, what I liked in school, I made straight A's. And what I didn't like in school, math, me too. I didn't make straight A's. In fact, the only class I ever failed in my life was Algebra 2. I failed Algebra 2, didn't take it seriously, and then my father died in my senior year, and I took it again, and I think the lady felt sorry for me and passed me, and I got through it. And so, is it real world classroom experience? Is it vocational world classroom experience? To teach fundamentals. Reading comprehension changed my life. From the time I was in middle school, I loved to read. And like I said, things I liked, I did well. Things I didn't like, I didn't do well. But because of my reading comprehension abilities, I believe this with all my heart, when I took the SAT way back when it was 1600, I made an 1150. And I believe an 1150, although my grades, my GPA was so-so, and I was a night school student at High Point College, I got into High Point. And I believe to this day it was because of my reading comprehension abilities on the SAT. And so teaching reading comprehension is important, and to go back to basics. And mathematics that is useful in life, useful on jobs. So to teach basics, reading and writing and math, fundamentals. And then the R in trust is transparency. Respecting other voices. To allow parents to have a voice in their schools. Now, for 24 years, I always joined the PTA. For years, it was $5, Parent Teacher Association. I joined. It was $5, and when I left a year ago, it was $7, and it was still $7 well spent. We had a great PTA. They fed us breakfast a couple times a year. They fed us lunch a couple of times a year, and they gave us gift cards. We had Pie Day on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. So I believe in the PTA, and the PTA does give parents a voice in schools, but you must get involved. But even at school boards, I understand over the past few years that different people have come to school board meetings and they were censored. Their voices were censored because maybe their tone of voice or the questions they asked, they didn't want to hear it. And so they censored those people. So to respect a voice, to respect opinions, and to understand that we do have differences of opinion. And in the end, the school board has to make hard decisions. that affect students and parents and taxpayers. And those decisions have to be made. But to understand, to be polite, and to understand and to allow respect for voices and opinions. The U is for using funds wisely. And that's where we're at now, isn't it, in Forsyth County with the funds that were spent. About 2 or 3 weeks ago, I sat down and had breakfast with a man. He spent 38 and a half years in school finance in Winston-Salem, Forsyth County. When I just spoke with him over breakfast for a couple of hours, I think he was one of the most brilliant men I've ever met in my life. And at that time, of course, Dr. Martin was over the school board, he was superintendent of schools, and the school board was a group of great people back then. And this man not only organized and established the financial system for Forsyth County, but he was so well known across western North Carolina. And his legacy in 38 and a half years for school finance, he built the system. And he left a positive legacy, a successful legacy. And when the COVID came, he was pushed aside by a superintendent and perhaps by board members themselves. And he was pushed aside and he retired. And his advice has not been sought after. Very little, although he is still sought after in other counties in North Carolina. And what he told me over breakfast was this, that a series of superintendents and CFOs came in. Of course, one who was from Virginia, her family didn't even move down here. Kids didn't move down here. Another one from Florida, husband, kids did not move up here, stayed in Florida. Who picks a superintendent like that? Where they're from out of state and their families still live out of state. Why would you do that? CFOs who live in Charlotte and brag because they work 2 or 3 days a week in the office and drive back and forth to Charlotte in a county car, on county gas cards. That type of thing. And so effective spending, wise use of tax dollars. When you pick a superintendent that's going to live in this county. If they've got kids or grandkids and they're still their family and they live in Forsyth County. CFOs. And this man told me, we're still dealing right now, and Dr. Phibbs is up against it. I like him personally. I've been watching him from afar so far, and I believe he's a good man. He's just got a lot of things to deal with, a lot of things on his plate. But it is important to find a CFO. And right now they're still dealing with a consultant group, and I've heard some members of the consultant group are good at what they do, and others are just too busy. They're just too busy. They have too many irons in the fire. They have irons in the fire in various counties all over the state and other places, other states as well. And so to pick an effective superintendent, to pick an effective CFO, and to use funds wisely, effective spending. No more leftist agendas. No more radical agendas. Is it teaching fundamentals? I live that in Guilford County. Professional development. Does it make you a better teacher? Does it make the school a better environment for learning? Or is it some sort of a radical leftist agenda even behind things like professional development for teachers? I experienced that. Does this expenditure contribute to an increase in student learning? And then the board, their oversight and accountability responsibilities. Whether the board knew as the COVID funds, the federal funds dried up, and that's when this debt problem started. When the federal funds dried up, the CFO and the superintendents in place continued the levels of spending as they were when the federal dollars were flowing in. And when that money evaporated, that money continued to be spent. The number of admin principals increased. The layers of bureaucracy in the central office increased. There was a 5% across the board pay increase in Forsyth County when the money wasn't there. And so did the board, the incumbent board, did they go along with all of that knowingly? That's incompetence. That's negligence. Or were they blind to it all? And if they were innocently blind to it all, then that is still a failure to provide oversight and accountability. And so again, to use the funds wisely, and if I'm a part of this board and there's 9 members on the board, to be one of 9, to practice, to be diligent in oversight and transparency and fiscal accountability. The S in trust is safe schools. Real discipline. To go back to a real discipline policy, a code of conduct that disciplines kids, that punishes kids that are non-compliant in the classroom. I was telling someone a minute ago, in 24 years of teaching, I tried my best with my own classroom management skills, whether it's lunch detention or a minute after the bell or 2 minutes after the bell. I tried my best to practice classroom management in my classrooms. The only thing basically that I wrote students up for in 24 years was non-compliance with a directive. When I tell you I put you in a seating chart, that's your seat. When I tell you to take out your materials, and you take out your materials. When I tell you to do your work, when we go pairs, when we go groups, to do your work, when I'm lecturing with an overhead, a PowerPoint, and you sit quietly and you take notes and pay attention. Don't take out your earbuds. Don't be texting on your phone. And when you break those rules, once I've made the rules clear and you break those rules, that's non-compliance with the directive. Again, if I could deal with it in the classroom, I dealt with it. When I couldn't deal with it between myself and a student, then I wrote that student up for non-compliance with the directive. And I told my principals, and I had good principals through 24 years, some along the way that wasn't as positive as I wanted them to be, but good principals, good admin. And I would tell them up front at the beginning of the year, I don't write up kids much, but when I do, then I expect for them to disappear for a day or two because I have done my part. And we had to call home and talk to parents, and they're not getting with the program. And so they're non-compliant. And so an in-school suspension program that punishes kids, that disciplines kids, because you're taking them from they're being disruptive, they're stopping a teacher from doing their job, they're stopping students from being able to learn in their environment. And so you separate them in an in-school suspension program, and the whole thing of social and emotional learning. There's a time and a place for everything. There's a time and a place for it. But in-school suspension should be a place where you put kids in a cubicle and they sit there and they do their work, and they don't do it with their earbuds in, and they can't talk to their neighbors. Because guess who their neighbors are? They're friends that get in trouble in other classes. And so they want to come in there. They want that to be a party room. And what you can't do is allow it to become a party room. It has to be a place of discipline. It has to be a place of punishment. And then if they can't function in there, then you out of school suspension them, and you force their parents to come in and do parent conferences. But the home is a whole different subject. A whole different subject. And so real discipline, a code of conduct, safe learning environments, deal with kids who are non-compliant, deal with kids who are abusive, verbally abusive. I told somebody at an earlier forum this a couple months ago, I don't know of another job except maybe than prison guard where you can be talked to and to be abused verbally as much as a teacher on the front lines in a classroom. I don't know. I don't know of another job. I have been cussed. I have been threatened. It's amazing what teachers have to go through. But what they want is a code of conduct that provides for a safe learning environment, and to remove kids that are non-compliant, to remove kids that are violent and make abusive threats. And the T is teacher classroom support, and that's the bottom line. The goal of every teacher, the goal of admin, the goal of the system itself, the school system itself. Student success is the goal of education. I taught freshmen for 8 years. We had a freshman academy, and I taught freshmen for 8 years world history. And when you meet those kids and they're 14 years old, and then you build a relationship with them, if you teach them in world, but then you see them in 10th, you see them in 11th, you see them in 12th. I coached 5 different sports, from middle school football and softball to girls varsity lacrosse. 9 years girls varsity lacrosse, made the state playoffs 3 times in 9 years. You build relationships with kids, and you watch them walk across that stage. I wrote college recommendations. And so you build these relationships, and student success is the goal of education. And to build character. Character ed, and we went through that. We had character ed programs in Guilford County in 24 years. But you must have a moral code. Now, traditionally, kids learned it in church, in synagogue, in their mosque. Kids had a moral code. When I went into teaching in 2001, and I got to Israel and Egypt and Persia, and I would tell stories about Abraham, I would tell stories about David, I would tell stories about Joseph and his coat of many colors and becoming prime minister of Egypt, and kids would shake their head. I'm talking about maybe not a majority, but a lot of kids would shake they knew those stories. But by the time I retired in 24, with 24 years in 25, the amount of kids that were shaking their heads had gone down, because there's not as many people in church. And so they don't know those stories. They don't know Moses. They don't know David. They don't know Daniel. They don't know those stories. And so you must have a moral code. So our parents with church and whatever religious background you had, there's a moral code there, but the schools have to be responsible for that as well. Now, me personally, I did Fellowship of Christian Athletes. I did Fellowship of Christian Athletes for 23 out of 24 years. There was a man there, Rob Shore. Rob Shore was there when I got there. He taught history. I taught history. He coached football. I coached football. He did Fellowship of Christian Athletes, FCA. It is a non-school. It's a secular organization, but it's a great organization. Now, the kids themselves, the students themselves, you don't have to be an athlete to participate, but it was originally made for athletes. And we met one Friday a month in the morning before school. And it had to be student-led. And I will admit, across 24 years, occasionally a student was absent or something like that, so I would do the devotion. But it's supposed to be student-led, and we had students that would lead those devotions. And Fellowship of Christian Athletes is a great group, and it's a way to introduce Christ and salvation and that moral code among students in public schools. Had a great district rep. He would come every once in a while, bring T-shirts and hoodies and coffee mugs and lanyards, and the kids loved him, and it was a great organization. But you've got to have those types of organizations in public schools to help build a moral code. In 24 years, I had 2 services that I was involved with. We had a young man who played football who committed suicide. And so we had a service in the gym before school, and all the kids that wanted to come. And I led them in a couple of songs that people knew. And then I was able to speak to them in a devotional type of way to try to give them a message of hope. And then I prayed with them. And then I stayed behind a few minutes into first block and talked to as many that wanted to talk. And then, of course, guidance counselors dealt with kids as well. So I was able to do that in a public school. The second time, we had a young man who played on the basketball team, and he was killed in a car wreck. And that was a terrible one. And we had a service in the gym before him. And both times I had principals, great principals, and they asked me through Fellowship of Christian Athletes to direct and to guide these services in the gym. And I was glad that I got the opportunity. Terrible circumstances, but I was glad I got the opportunity to do those types of things, even in the public schools. And so to build a moral code, and the moral code and character goes hand in hand with academic progress, with reading comprehension skills, with math skills that are real world, work world, to become responsible adults and productive citizens. Responsible adults and productive citizens. We need admin that back teachers in the classroom, free up their planning periods, decrease unproductive meetings that just steal time, and forcing them to write reports that nobody reads. And then the central office to provide admin support on discipline issues. Teachers know they want their classrooms to be productive, safe environments. And I would say in principals that I've met through 30 years, they want productive, safe environments. But sometimes their hands are tied by central office. And we need a central office that supports admin in discipline issues so that admin can support teachers on the front lines in the classroom. Motivated teachers respond to their calling. I believe with all my heart teaching is a calling. Just like teaching a Sunday school class or preaching in a church or putting a for sale sign in your yard and becoming a missionary and selling out and going overseas. It's a calling. And teaching is a calling. I loved history. I knew it when I was in the 5th grade. Had a wonderful 5th grade teacher at Fairview Intermediate School on 14th Street in Winston-Salem. I had a wonderful 5th grade teacher. And I knew I loved history. And from that day forward, I believed someday I'd be a history teacher. But it's not enough just to love your subject. You got to love young people. And you got to want to build relationships, whether it's through FCA, whether it's through coaching. I coached 5 different sports from middle school to varsity levels. Motivated teachers respond to their callings to teach a subject and to build meaningful relationships with their students. Now this morning, I'm glad you came out and braved the elements. I want in this city, county school system, I believe we need a new vision, new leadership. I think the incumbent board, whether they were blind, whether they were incompetent, whether they were willful, or whether they allowed it to happen, we need a new vision, new leadership to rebuild a sense of trust between school board, taxpayers, parents, school personnel, and on the ballot. I don't get to pick name placement on the ballot. There are 10 people running for District 2 for the Winston-Salem Forsyth County School Board. They picked a letter out of a box, and they picked the letter F, last name F. And then they didn't go forward, they went backwards alphabetically. So Hinson is number 10 on the list out of 10. So what I want you to do is I want you to take your Republican primary ballot, go to the bottom of the list, Derick G. Hinson. I'm also the only one with a middle initial. The only one with a middle initial. And I'm number 10 on the list. Go down to the bottom of the list, find Hinson, and please make me your first vote out of the 4 that you get to vote for District 2. Vote Hinson in the primary, find Hinson on the ballot, and please give me your first vote for the primary. Thank you.